On this podcast, you'll find interviews with high-performing, successful individuals in life sciences. On a weekly basis, we cover their proven methods, principles, strategies, and mindsets to implement new technologies that scale to meet the needs of people in our world.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Life Science Success. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Don, and I'm a digital marketer in life sciences. And before we get to our guest today, I have just a quick message to play from our sponsor.
This episode of Life Science Success is brought to you by D3 Digital Media Marketing. Dive into the digital world with confidence and creativity on your side. D3 Digital Media Marketing is your all-in-one solution for making a lasting impact online. From the vibrant, engaging world of social media marketing, podcasts, and webinars, to the strategic depths of website development, SEO, pay-per-click, email, and content marketing, we tailor our approach to fit your unique brand story. Let's elevate your presence, connect with your audience, and drive success together. Your digital journey starts here. Visit d3digitalmedia.com to learn more.
In this episode of Life Science Success, we're going to sit down with Paul Jaminet. He's the founder and CEO of Angiex. We're going to explore his groundbreaking work in developing nuclear-delivered antibody-drug conjugates. So with that, welcome, Paul.
Oh, well, thank you, Dan. It's great to be with you.
Yeah, thanks a lot for being here. Would you mind just taking a minute and just maybe tell the listeners a little bit about your journey and how you transitioned from astrophysics of all things to life sciences? I think it's an interesting story.
Yeah, I've had a motley career. I'm still trying to make up my mind what I'll do when I grow up, but I started my career as an astrophysicist, as you mentioned. So when I finished my undergraduate career, I wasn't sure what I wanted to do, but I was interested in science, and I felt it would be like a good thing to do to understand how scientists acquired knowledge. And so I went to graduate school in physics, and was successful enough after I completed my Ph.D. to get a job at Harvard, where I worked for 4 years at the Center for Astrophysics. And but after 4 years there, I was approaching kind of the third cycle of doing the same kind of research. And in physics, you can't. There's only enough money for one person to be the world's leading expert in each area, and so you have to keep doing the same thing over and over again. And I wanted something new, and the internet was invented, so I left to help start a software company. And that was a lot of fun, so I've considered myself an entrepreneur ever since. And we sold that company in 2001 with the same founders. We started another company, but my co-founders wanted to be in Silicon Valley, so we were in Boston. So that company moved to California in 2002, and I stayed in Boston with my wife, who was a biomedical scientist at a children's hospital in Boston. And so then I kind of telecommuted part-time for a while to that company while starting to pursue some personal projects. One of them was learning how to be healthy. And that ended up leading to writing a diet and health book, starting a blog, a health retreat, a natural health business, which turned out to be a very good move because we were able to help a lot of people. And it also connected me to a lot of people who would prove helpful after we started Angiex. And, so I considered myself an entrepreneur in the sense that my goal was to do things that ought to be done, but that no one else would do if I didn't do them. So things that needed doing, and just find a way to contribute and make a difference. And so I told my wife if she discovered a way to cure cancer, that I would help start a company. And so as it happened, she did discover such a way. So I had to follow through and start Angiex. So in 2015, we co-founded Angiex. We were able to get seed funding from Peter Thiel, which was a good start. And it's been off to the races ever ever since. So it's taken us almost 9 years, but we made what we believe is a great drug, and we started in the clinic this year. And so it's still early days in the clinic, but we're very excited about the drug.
Do you know, this is not a prepared question at all, so you're going to get something just totally off the cuff from me. But since you're funded by Peter Thiel, do you know Thrive Bioscience? They're also in Boston, and their CEO, whenever I interviewed him, he brought up the same exact thing, that they were funded by them as well.
No, I don't know them. So I'm I tend to sort of stick to my last and focus on my company, and so I'm not as well connected. Also, my experience in the therapeutics industry started when we when we founded the company. So
Yeah.
I'm not quite as well connected as a lot of other people, but I'm enthusiastic. So
for anybody that wants the reference, essentially it's the episode with Thomas Porsche from Thrive. So you can go listen to that episode as well, and it'll mention something similar, but they do automated cell culture. So so kind of another cool technology that is also needed in our space, and a very important company as well. But to come back to you and Angiex, what was the key motivation, really behind having a nuclear delivered antibody drug conjugate?
yeah, well, so my wife is essentially she's a molecular biologist, a cell biologist, and a terrific experimentalist, and she discovered this very special biology. So she worked in the field of angiogenesis, which is the creation of new blood vessels. And angiogenesis has been, kind of a dream since Judah Folkman first proposed this approach in the 1970s, that if you could attack the angiogenic tumor vasculature, you could potentially make a universal therapy for all solid cancer patients. And the tumor vasculature is very different than the normal vasculature of healthy adults. So in principle, it should be targetable. And so there's been this long dream in the field that if you could target the tumor vasculature without harming the normal vasculature, then you can have a huge impact on cancer and potentially make a very safe and effective drug. And my wife shared that dream, and also our third founder, Hal Dvorak, who discovered VEGF, vascular endothelial growth factor. That was also the main point of his career. So he was very happy to have, been the scientific discoverer who led to over $100 billion of drug sales with the VEGF drugs. But he really wanted to, to save lives and, make a therapy that would really reduce cancer mortality. So my wife is an outstanding biologist, did a good amount of detective work to discover what we quickly became convinced was the best target out of the 20,000 genes in the human genome for making a therapy against angiogenic vessels. And that target was a protein called TM4SF1, and it's an endothelial specific protein, and it basically distinguishes between the quiescent state and the angiogenic state. It's upregulated about 20-fold in angiogenic endothelial cells compared to quiescent endothelial cells, and it basically switches endothelial cells from a non-proliferating, non-invasive state into a proliferating invasive state where they create new vascular tubes and invade tissue to expand its blood supply. And so a very interesting protein. And it turns out tumor cells also turn it on to enable invasion and metastasis. So it seems to be universal in tumor cells as well. So we had a way to address two compartments of the tumor, both the tumor vasculature and the invasive and metastatic tumor cells. And it had the potential for terrific tumor homing because the expression per cell is about 20-fold higher in the tumor than in normal tissue of adults. So it's high in embryonic development, but it's not high in adults who have ceased to grow. So, so it was an extremely attractive target. And one of the interesting things she discovered was that in environments where where cells are exposed to growth factors, TM4SF1 forms protein complexes that internalize to the nucleus. And we could have antibodies hitchhike along that route. So that was basically a transport route for growth factor activated proteins. So it enables endothelial cells to respond to growth factors. And our antibodies could find these complexes and, just like a hobo hopping on a freight train could hitch a ride to the nucleus. And that's a very exciting place to be able to deliver drugs. So so on just about every aspect you could imagine a drug target, it was an extremely attractive drug target for antibody-drug conjugate therapy. And so, the more we learned about this biology, the more we felt, there had to be drugs made against it.
Yeah, I do find it interesting, especially in terms of solid tumors. And I mean, my background is very limited from a science as well as medical standpoint. However, early on, I worked with a researcher on a solid tumor cancer drug that essentially, would expose when you expose the tumor to a specific frequency of light after administering a drug, it essentially would release oxygen, and that oxygen then would kill the cancer cells. So, and the drug was only absorbed by cancer cells. So, but this is a long time ago. But you're bringing me back in terms of thinking about all of the vasculature, essentially tumor's favorite place it seems like to go, as well as find a really nice place that's really close to some place where blood's being exchanged anyway, and just grow like crazy. And so when you're going through the research for all of this, can you tell me a little bit more about the kind of how the treatment itself works, but also how are things progressing right now for you through phase 1?
Yeah, so it's an antibody-drug conjugate therapy. So we have an antibody with a conjugated tubulin inhibitor payload. So the antibody is responsible for homing to the tumor, finding the tumor vascular endothelial cells and the tumor cells. And then once it binds to them, it internalizes to the nucleus. When the antibody gets to the nucleus, the nuclear proteasome quickly recognizes it as foreign and degrades the antibody, and that releases the chemotherapy. So the conjugated chemotherapy can then act on the cells with cytotoxic effect and shrink the tumor. And so we're currently in the phase 1 dose escalation, and we've dosed at the 2 lowest dose levels, and we've so far had no drug-related adverse effects. We've scanned 1 patient, and we've had stable disease. So that's about the best you can hope for. The dose levels are too low to produce efficacy on the first scan. Potentially they can with repeat dosing. But we're very happy that, so far there have been no adverse effects. So, very safe therapy, and we're not that far away from dose levels that where tubulin inhibitor ADCs have been approved. So it's not unreasonable to expect efficacy before long.
It's great. And in terms of the approach that you have and the drug that you're offering, what challenges have you faced in terms of innovating the approach, and how have you overcome them?
Yeah, so I would say innovation in this industry is not easy. It's typically, at least 10 years to revenue. In our case, we started the company 9 years ago, and we're still 5 years away from revenue. So, 14 years on the order of $300 million to get a drug approved. So, you have to gather $300 million, a lot of employees, expertise, and 14 or so years of effort, sustain it without. And there's lots of ways you can fail along the way, and if at any point you can't, fund the work, then the company dies. So it's quite challenging. And when you have to pull together a lot of different people and get a lot of supporters, then it tends to be, you're doing something, kind of by committee, or by a large group. And so it becomes challenging to be very innovative. And in particular, people who have large sums of money tend to, and with this industry, the failure rate is so high that people are very skeptical. And, to the point of being, you could call them jaded. They expect failure, and so it's definitely a challenge to build a company, and it's even more challenging when you're someone like me who's from outside the industry, and so you have skepticism about expertise and abilities. Um, so there are definitely lots of challenges, and I would say a lot of the fund structures, the institutional specialist funds, they typically have to return money to LPs in 5 years, or some timeline that's relatively short compared to the timeline to make a drug. And that means, there's a physics expression, shot noise or Poisson noise. If you only have a small number of shots on goal, you need a pretty high percentage to avoid a risk that you have no successes. And, for a venture investor, that means, it could mean the end of your career. So, people want a high probability of success, and they want to return, exit within 5 years. And, so, a lot of, the expert money and the larger money is out of reach until, you have something that's pretty proven. So, early on, they might fund something that's not very innovative, where they know a field is hot, it's new, everybody's excited, everybody believes in it. They can be confident there will be an exit, if you have some small advantage. But if you're doing something like us that's completely new and no one else is working on it, then they all say, well, I want to see clinical data, I want to see validation that it works, and we'll have an exit. So, it's and then in our case, we knew that, the science was transformative, but if we failed and if we messed it up, then, no one might ever attempt it again. And with a vascular antigen, if you're delivering a cytotoxic payload to the vasculature, if people don't die of cancer, they commonly die of cardiovascular disease. So, definitely there's there's a risk that, you'll do something very harmful. So we wanted to make our drug extremely safe and highly optimized before we took it into the clinic. So we did take our time, and we took 5 years before we finalized our drug, and did, quite a lot of experimentation, and that was highly fruitful. So we were able to increase the therapeutic index tenfold compared to a prior TM4SF1 directed ADC that had been made by Pfizer. And so we did make an excellent drug, but but 5 years is a long time in this industry. So so we had to figure out how to keep the company funded through all of that. And, so there definitely have been a number of challenges, but it's very gratifying to now be in the clinic and be very close to getting, data that will demonstrate the value of our drug and, the value of all the scientific work that our scientific founders did.
Yeah, I've seen all too well how the challenges of funding, sort of face a company, right? And without, grants, without angels, without, people who care about, whatever it is that you're developing and sort of, fostering it along, like you said, the company could die, but also that particular idea in terms of solving, for a particular type of cancer or whatever it is that you're working on also could die along with it, because all too many times then after a negative event, it's too hard to overcome against the resistance that you have to get started again. And so
Right.
we're seeing that as well with companies that just weren't making it, but now they have people that are potentially interested again. And just carrying that on is not an easy thing to get started again.
Yeah, that's right. So TM4SIP1, it actually has, a fairly lengthy history, but with a very small number of players. So it's so important for invasion and metastasis that it's broadly expressed across malignant cancers. And so one of the first antibodies that was raised when people first started injecting tumor lysates into mice was a TM4SIP1 directed antibody. And Bristol Myers Squibb took that to the clinic in 1990 and had success with a radioimmunoconjugate, but then gave up in 1997 when the industry gave up on radioactivity. And then TM4SIP1 was almost entirely forgotten for, going on 20 years, and only our founders discovered it as an important protein and revived it. But there's still only 150 papers in PubMed on TM4SF1. So, it's unknown protein, unknown target. And yeah, it's and we've experienced some negativity. Well, Bristol Myers Squibb gave up on it. Pfizer had a preclinical program and gave up on it. Why should we believe that, better than they did? And, why is no one else working on it? And, so it's, you have to be able to explain not only why you're interested in it, but why no one else is. So, and that can be harder to explain. It gets to deep questions about scientific discovery. How can a scientific discoverer know something is true and important, and but yet no one else can figure it out, and it can be difficult to persuade them.
Such an important point. I mean, but again, my mind instantly, the minute that you were saying that, about the big businesses that gave up, right? There's a reason why Kodak didn't develop, the digital camera, and get it, out in the world right away. There's a reason why the music player came from somewhere else in the industry altogether. With the iPod, Apple inventing the iPod and essentially, getting that out there. And, you could kind of trace these things back and say, well, maybe that company didn't initially create that technology. And, whether it's, I don't know, the mouse that's sitting on your desk, your music player, your digital camera, there are lots of other companies that along the way tried things and just, decided, hey, look, I'm going to set this thing aside and not continue forward. And then all of a sudden there's a major success and everybody's like, well, why didn't we do this sooner? Well, yeah, I mean, we need innovative companies to be thinking of that stuff as well.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I think, one definition of a professional is somebody who's been trained for 30 years in doing things the way things have traditionally been done. And, and I think, pharma companies have large collections of well-trained professionals. And, but that's not necessarily the background that is most likely to lead to innovation. And yeah, I think it's it's hard to innovate. There is a hope that innovations will come out of academia, but I think people are very familiar with the difficulties translating from academia to industry. But even in academia, it's very difficult to do innovative work because it's hard to get grants. It's most academics are like the drunk who loses his keys in the dark and searches for them under the streetlight because the light is the funding, and you need to get grants to survive. So you have to be under the streetlight, and and often it's a higher priority to be under the streetlight than to actually find the keys. So
yeah. I also think, though, too, that with your diverse background, it has to somewhat inform kind of the different ways that you are able to troubleshoot problems. And so I just would love to know a little bit about, do you feel like your experience in physics and software entrepreneurship have influenced your leadership and strategic decisions inside the company?
yeah, I would say they definitely help. So one thing they give me is courage. So I have some experience succeeding and making things work in other areas. So I know some general principles. One important principle could be called the Pareto principle, that typically like 20% of the resources accomplish 80% of the accomplishment, or sometimes even more extreme. And in software, there are some famous uh, uh, books and arguments where a small number of software developers often have a huge impact, and often weaker developers kind of clutter things up and create confusion. And so actually you're much better having a small group of uh, elite people. Uh, and so another thing that helped me was the entrepreneurial experience and thinking about relationships, learning to think in terms of relationships and the value network that you're creating, the relationship network. What do you need for success? What are the enduring relationships that you need? I guess another thing I learned was that being a bit of an oddball myself, you can succeed with oddball people, and so there are, we benefited greatly by tremendous work by, some people who were, maybe considered a little difficult to work with at other companies, and but were very helpful to us. And um, so yeah, I would say a lot of the experience of scientific accomplishment. I had the privilege of working at elite institutions. I worked closely with 7 Nobel laureates in physics. My thesis advisor was a Nobel laureate. And so I had a good scientific grounding. One of the things that I learned from them was that humility is important. They never hesitated to ask dumb questions, and but often the dumb questions are very basic questions, and they didn't care if they looked dumb. They wanted to learn. And so I've I would say have a well-grounded scientific humility, and just want to focus on what's important, what we need to learn. And I guess another thing I learned from my entrepreneurial experience was in building a company, the importance of emotional leadership. So in our first software company, we had and a lot of startups are like this. We had a lot of ups and downs. We were on the verge of failure like 3 times, and we had some significant highs. We had an acquisition offer for $230 million that the board turned down because they thought they could get $1 billion not long after. And so, but we had the benefit of one of my fellow entrepreneurs who was the founder and CEO was, always kept a very positive uh, emotional stance and, was never discouraged by the hardship. And that impressed me at the time. And, so I tend to be very calm and even keeled, but I learned from that, it's also valuable to be, upbeat, encouraging, and, especially in the hard times, or challenge, or
Right.
times that appear risky. And, so I think that experience stood me in good stead. Uh, so as you can imagine, there's ups and downs and challenging times in building a therapeutics company. So, but fortunately, we've been, I think we've had some heavenly assistance, and we've been, helped through all the hardship, and uh, we've been able to get our drug to patients.
That's good. What's the greatest leadership advice that you've ever received?
So I would say, the greatest leadership advice I've received comes from the Bible, from Jesus, and I actually have the phrase, love your neighbor as one of our values on our website, and so Jesus said, the two great commandments are to love God and love your neighbor, and he elaborated on the second one, saying, do good to those who hate you. And so the principle would just be relentless at being constructive, at doing good, and don't be diverted in any way into negativity, but always be constructive and positive, and look for ways to make things better. And so that's what that to me is probably one of the most important principles of building a business. If you're trying to construct something difficult, then it's even more important to be constructive than it is in ordinary life. So that's number one. There's there are a lot of other things, like one thing that struck me recently. I follow men's college basketball a little bit, and the University of Connecticut has won the last 2 championships. And I looked at an interview with their coach, Dan Hurley, and he emphasized that he teaches being relentlessly competitive, and they try to compete and be at their very best every minute of every practice, and make the practices harder than the games, so that the games become easy. And and I try to remember something like that. And in my case, it's not so much competitiveness as constructiveness, but trying to be, relentlessly look for the best possible value, best possible use of my time, and make good things happen.
Yeah, I think having that level of, back to love your neighbor is, the one sort of, thing that I could say about that is having focus and being constructive. I feel like it's a cross company thing that's needed in a lot of organizations where, people, competing amongst each other doesn't really help anything. Competing, in terms of coming up with the greatest idea and getting that idea, out to market, is where the real value is. And this idea of, sort of measuring things that at the end of the day don't deliver that same value it just, it becomes unimportant to most organizations as well, I feel like. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, there's always a little bit of a challenge. You win as a team, so it does take, quite a number of people and, lots of contributors to build a successful company and make a successful drug. Uh, but at the same time, everyone needs to be coordinated and, uh, working towards a common goal. And, in creative industries and in scientific work, it's natural that there should be, uh, divergent perspectives, multiple perspectives. And, so there's definitely a bit of art to achieving that coordination and efficient pursuit of a shared goal, but without, hindering, that creative contributions. Uh, and, so I think there's really no way around it except to, have a culture where people really care about each other and care about the ultimate goal, and where everything is subordinated to that, mission, particular mission in our case of saving lives by making a great cancer drug.
Absolutely. What inspires you?
Um, so what inspires me? Well, I think, I mean, to a great extent, I'm inspired by the opportunity to do my duty. And so that may sound not very inspiring, but yeah, I have a duty to my wife. She did this great science and, discovered this, potential way to cure cancer, but it probably would have been stillborn if I hadn't started a company. And, and I have a duty to cancer patients. So many people die. And of course, in my current role, I hear about a lot of people who are dying and, patients who we hope to get into our trial, but have died recently. My mother died of cancer when she was 33. I was 10 when she died. And, so I definitely feel a duty to try to get our drug and our company into a position to help them. And, of course, I have duties to investors and employees so for me, that's, my, in terms of the inspiration that actually in practice inspires me, when I get up in the morning, why am I eager to go to work? It's, well, I can't let my wife down. I can't let my investors down. And as I mentioned, like 60% of the shares of Angiex are held by former guests of my health retreat. So, there are people who came to know me and trust me and, recognize that as a capable scientist by being able to figure out natural approaches to improving their health. And, so we had a lot of success at that retreat. I think just about everybody had very significant health improvements. And, so that kind of, the credibility and the trust that we gained was really, having that network of people was, I don't think we could have built Angiex with that, unless I had those resources. So, the professional investors can be a little fickle, when the market's enthusiastic, they're eager to invest, but then when, the industry is in a downturn, then they're very cautious. so it's it's important to have those people in your network who are more stably connected to you. And yeah, so but there's so they've helped us, but now I have a reciprocal duty to make sure that they succeed. And so yeah, I would say my what inspires me, it's it'd probably be nice to say I'm inspired by the thought of potentially saving a great many lives, but the hourly motivation is that I can't let down I can't let down my wife, I can't let down the people who are depending on me.
It's also neat to have such a connection to really great science as well. I mean, the delivery of this, the expression of it, and yeah, the method of action. It sounds very very amazing to me as well. Next question: what concerns you?
Well, I think the biggest concern of a lot of biotech CEOs is always, fundraising, especially if you don't have deep-pocketed backers with, a lot of financial staying power. So, it gets to some of the regulatory structure of the industry, and you have to make in ADCs $15 to $30 million of CMC investments even before you're allowed to dose the first patient and can prove that your drug works. So, there are big hurdles to overcome, and then, similarly, a couple $100 million of investments before you can get approval and get revenue. So, it's there's definitely, it has to be top of mind, for a CEO at almost all times, is how am I going to, to keep the company funded, and how can I plan ahead? What are the risks, and how can I forestall them? And so I would say that's a very major consideration. That in terms of development for a small company, with a big company who has many projects, there's a lot of consistency. So you have different projects in every stage, and you have to think about all areas of drug development. But for a small company who's primarily focused on one drug, you have periods when you're focused on the antibody, or periods on the linker, or then when you're focused on CMC manufacturing, or clinical team, clinical development, or biomarkers, or different things. So there tends to be a rotation of scientific and technical and operational concerns, and that can be fun, but it also can be sometimes you have to move away from something you enjoy to something you don't enjoy quite as much, and yeah, so you have to be flexible. But in terms of what concerns me, I would say, number one is fundraising and financing risk. Number two is just some kind of random event that causes trouble. Like if a patient has a heart attack, it might be, completely unrelated to our drug. But how can people know whether it's drug related or not drug related? And, things like that can, derail a trial. And, if you get on clinical hold because a patient dies or something, then, then how do you fundraise if you're, so it's, there's always things to be worried about, and, you just have to, do your best to get past the risk points, and, to do all the work you can to minimize the risk and get to success.
Last question: what excites you?
Most of all, it's it's seeing the drug in the clinic, seeing it succeed. in our case, we had such a thorough and careful understanding of the science. We had such wonderful experimentalists and scientists as our founders, and we did such a careful job of drug design, that I felt like I really knew what the drug would do when it got in the clinic, and how it would act in patients. And it's been performing exactly that way, but it's gratifying because now people are seeing it. And so just to give one example, the clinical investigators are excited. So we just had a new cohort open up in our dose level, and one of the investigators, grabbed all 3 slots the first day because she just wanted to get her patients on the drug. And so that kind of excitement is it's very gratifying to see other people getting excited too.
Well, thank you so much, Paul, for being here on the Life Science Success podcast. I greatly appreciate you being here and for telling me about Angiex and the great work that you guys are doing. I wish you all the success in your clinical trials, and hope that things, continue smooth in the future, because, obviously we need as many treatments out there as possible for these patients and the cohort of individuals that are afflicted by solid tumors.
Yep. All right. Thank you, Don.
Thank you for listening to Life Science Success. For complete details about this podcast, including show notes, how to get in touch with guests, and more episodes, please visit www.lifesciencesuccess.com. If there's someone you'd like for us to invite to the show as a guest, please let me know by sending me a message at the podcast website. Please click subscribe on your favorite podcast app, share the podcast, or tell a friend about it, and last but not least, rate the podcast. Thank you again.